Russia-Ukraine war, list of key events. As the war enters its day, these are the main developments. Fighting. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the Ilyushin 76 plane that crashed near the border with Ukraine was shot down by Ukrainian air defenses, whether on purpose or by mistake. The death toll from Russian missile strikes on Ukraine's second-largest city Kharkiv earlier this week rose to 11, officials said. Putin said Russia's future ruling class should be made up of army veterans, and not weirdos who show their backsides. The remarks appeared to slam a raunchy, almost naked celebrity party held in Moscow last month that drew fierce public backlash. A court in Moscow on Friday extended the pretrial detention of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich by 2 months, following his arrest last year on espionage charges. Economy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the creation of a new economic body to assist businesses in wartime after several entrepreneurs voiced outrage at the arrest of a prominent banker. In his nightly video address, Zelensky said the All-Ukraine Economic Platform would help businesses overcome the challenges posed by Russia's invasion. Diplomacy. U.S. President Joe Biden criticized congressional Republicans for stalling military aid to Ukraine amid a lack of consensus on a separate deal to reinforce the U.S.-Mexico border. The chair of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee said Turkey needed to cooperate better on holding Russia accountable for its invasion of Ukraine following the U.S. government's approval of a $23 billion deal to sell F-16 warplanes to Ankara. The chief negotiator for Moldova's Russian-backed separatist Transnistria region announced that his team would no longer attend talks on the country's future in areas under government control because he feared arrest. Russia-Ukraine war, list of key events. As the war enters its day, these are the main developments. Fighting. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 14 attack drones and 5 missiles on the southern Black Sea regions with air defense systems destroying 11 of the drones. The Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine said 6 people were injured in the historic city of Odessa and residential buildings and a warehouse were damaged. Ukrainian security sources said they orchestrated a drone attack on an oil refinery in the southern Russian town of Tuapse, about 240 kilometers, 150 miles, southeast of the Russian-annexed Crimean Peninsula. The attack caused a major fire, but there were no reports of casualties. Nepal's Foreign Minister Narayan Prakash Saud told the Associated Press news agency that Nepal had asked Russia to send back hundreds of Nepali nationals who had been recruited to fight against Ukraine and repatriate the bodies of those who had died in the conflict. The Russian army is estimated to have recruited more than 200 Nepali nationals to fight in Ukraine and at least 14 have died there, Saud said. Ukraine's National Resistance Center said it had seen mercenaries from Malaysia, accompanied by a translator at Russian military training camps in the Russian-occupied Donetsk region. It warned that anyone fighting alongside the Russians against Ukraine was a military target. Malaysia did not respond to requests for more information on the alleged presence of Malaysian nationals. Several major Ukrainian state organizations, including the state-run energy firm Naftogaz, the Post Office and Transport Safety Agency, reported major cyber attacks that a source close to the government blamed on Russian intelligence. Politics and diplomacy. A court in St. Petersburg jailed anti-war activist Daria Trepova for 27 years after finding her guilty of terrorism in the killing of a prominent ultranationalist blogger Vladlen Tatarsky last year that Russia said was orchestrated by Ukraine. Trepova told the court she thought the package she gave Tatarsky, whose real name was Maxim Fomin, contained a covert listening device and did not realize it was rigged with explosives. A Moscow court jailed prominent nationalist and former rebel commander Igor Girkin for 4 years for inciting extremism. Girkin, also known as Igor Strelkov, has repeatedly criticized the Kremlin for its war strategy in Ukraine. Paris-based press freedom group Reporters Without Borders, RSF, said it was concerned that Ukrainian journalists investigating corruption were coming under increasing pressure, noting recent acts of intimidation against Yuri Nikolov, Irina Reb and the staff of Bias. Info. Weapons. The White House urged senators in the United States to reach a deal linking vital military assistance for Ukraine to U.S. border security, after reports that former President Donald Trump, who is seeking re-election, was trying to torpedo any agreement in an attempt to deprive U.S. President Joe Biden, who is seeking a second term, of a political victory. Russia-Ukraine war, list of key events. As the war enters its day, these are the main developments. Fighting. A Russian military transport plane carrying 74 people crashed in the Belgorod region of southern Russia not far from the Ukrainian border. Russia said there were 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war on board who were part of a planned prisoner swap, and accused Ukraine of shooting down the plane. Ukraine did not confirm it had shot down the plane, or that Ukrainian POWs were passengers. The Ukrainian military said it would continue to target military transport aircraft it believed were carrying missiles for Russia's war on Ukraine, and Air Force Commander Mykola Oleshchuk accused Russia of trying to discredit Ukraine over the aircraft crash. Ukraine has the right to defend itself and destroy the means of the aggressor's aerial attack, he said. Ukraine's military intelligence service said Kyiv had not been asked to ensure airspace security on Wednesday around the Belgorod area, as had been the case during previous prisoner-of-war swaps with Moscow. It said it had no reliable information on who was on board the crashed plane. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for full clarity on the circumstances of the crash and accused Moscow of playing with the lives of Ukrainian prisoners of war. The RBC Ukraine news outlet said he canceled a planned regional trip as well as events linked to his birthday to deal with the crash. 2 people were killed and 8 injured in the town of Kherson, close to the front line in the east, after a Russian missile attack hit a residential area, Donetsk Regional Governor Vadim Filashkin said. Kherson lies to the northwest of Mariinka, a town still held by Ukraine but all but destroyed after many months of fighting with Russian forces. Regional Governor Ole Kuiper said 1 person was injured in a Russian drone attack on Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa that hit residential homes and started a fire. Avdiivka Mayor Vitaly Barabash said Russian forces entered the war-battered town for the first time but were pushed back. Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups entered the southern part of the city of Avdiivka, but they were dislodged, Barabash told the AFP news agency, but declined to say when the Russians entered the town or how long they were there. About 32,000 people lived in Avdiivka before Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Politics and diplomacy. Filippo Grandi, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, said he was worried that the war in Ukraine had been forgotten amid crises in other parts of the world. Speaking at the end of a week-long visit to Kyiv, Grandi told the Associated Press news agency that it was important to remind the international community that Ukrainians continued to live through a brutal war and that he was concerned humanitarian aid was being held up by political wrangling. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico met Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal in the western Ukrainian town of Uzhhorod, where he reaffirmed support for Ukraine's bid to join the European Union, but said policy differences remained on issues including NATO accession. Fico, elected after tapping into pro-Russian sentiments, said he did not believe there was a military solution to the war, and welcomed a peace plan proposed by Ukraine's president, although he called it unrealistic. In the first of 3 required readings, Russia's State Duma passed a bill to confiscate the property, money and valuables of anyone convicted of spreading criticism of the Russian army. A U.S. Senate committee approved 20-1 in favor of the Rebuilding Economic Prosperity and Opportunity (REPO) for Ukrainians Act, which would help set the stage for the U.S. to confiscate Russian assets and hand them over to Ukraine for post-war reconstruction. The bill has broad bipartisan support but needs to pass both houses of Congress before it can be signed by the president and become law. The EU, the US, Japan and Canada froze some $300 billion of Russian central bank assets in 2022 when Russia launched its full-scale invasion nearly 2 years ago. Ukrainian Diana Yastremska became the first women's qualifier to reach the semi-finals of the Australian Open in 45 years. After her latest victory, and wearing blue and yellow to match Ukraine's flag, she said she was proud of those fighting for their country. Weapons. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said European nations had to do more to provide the weapons for Ukraine to defend itself from Russia's onslaught. The contributions that European nations have earmarked for 2024 so far are not big enough, Scholz told Die Zeit Weekly in an interview.